Cotter from the City of Markham, and Dan, I don't know where Dan went, but Dan DeRusso from City of Richmond Hill. There he is, City of Richmond Hill. And they are going to be talking to you today about the events, the municipal event Back to Events guide that they produce through the network of municipal event planners. So Rebecca, why don't you introduce yourself? Just give us because you've been with us for a long time. You've spoken at our conference. And so why don't you just introduce yourself for those who don't know you real quickly, and then we'll move to Dan and we'll get going.
Sure. Thanks, Debbie. Good morning, everyone. I have the great fortune of knowing many of you on the call, so thanks very much for spending some time together with Dan and I this morning. My name is Rebecca Cotter. I'm the Manager of Communications Operations and Special Events with the City of Markham. Previously, I was the Supervisor of Special Events with the Town of Oakville, and I'm an executive member of the Network of Municipal Event Planners, NMEP is the acronym, together with Dan, and we're here today to speak to the publication that we put out in September. It's a culmination of research, consultation, and our own personal experience, going back as far as Deb indicated our experience goes in the industry. My background is specifically with outdoor special events. I used to be the outdoor event organizer at Downsby Park. I own a supplier company and have been a member of FEO probably for about 12 years now. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rebecca. Dan, Dan DeRusso from City of Richmond Hill. Over to you.
Sure, I can jump in. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan DeRusso. As was mentioned, I am the acting manager for the City of Richmond Hill's Event Services section. We run a magnitude of festivals and events in our community seasonally, and I was fortunate to be a part of the planning group for this recovery guide that we're going to be speaking to you about today. I also sit as a board member with Festivals and Events Ontario, and I am the executive lead for our NMEP networking group across the province. So very excited about how that group has come to be and the work that we've done over the last several years, and excited to be on this call with all you folks today. Looking forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thanks, Dan. So let's get going. That was a really good segue, Dan. So both of you being the executive from NMEP, yes, sorry. How did the guide get, one of the questions I did have is, how did you get going on this? How did this start? I know, was COVID part of the impetus for this?
Yeah, it was indeed. We found quite quickly through COVID as it hit that it, of course, impacted the industry quite severely. And through our research and several discussions that we had with our municipal colleagues, there was not one set of guidelines that spoke specifically to the work we do within our respective environments. There were several guides, both accredited and not, that we were looking at in terms of recovery work that we needed to do within our respective areas. And so in compiling all of the research and reviewing all of the guidelines that were put out and published, we felt that there was a need for it to speak specifically to the work we do in the municipal sector. And that's in essence how this guide came to be.
Thanks, Dan. Anything to add, Rebecca?
I think that summarizes it. It's been a tough road since March, but we're happy to pave the way for others who are on it with us.
And how have you been using this guide? And because your network is quite broad. There's what, about 70 members to your network?
We have, there's 65 municipalities across the province that are involved in our network. Okay. We have, of that 65, there's about 140 plus members that join us in a pre-COVID scenario in quarterly meetings where we were talking best practice, sharing resources, etc. And through COVID, we've actually established monthly Zoom meetings with our peers to talk specifically about recovery and reformatting of festivals and events that we've been planning and delivering through this, this pandemic.
Okay, thanks. And how have you been presenting this to your communities?
The guide
Yeah,
itself?
the guide. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the guide itself is a PDF document. Perhaps many of you have seen it, as FEO has been kind to share it through their network. We, like Dan said, have a very robust network of colleagues within the municipal sector in Ontario. So when we set out to develop this guide, it was, a version of sharing a draft with them that really brought the original culmination of what the NMEP executive members were able to put on paper. So there are 8 executive members. We combed through as much federal, provincial, municipal, regional, regulatory, non-regulatory information as was out there kind of pre-July of this year, published by any agencies, stakeholders, subject matter experts in the event industry, and came together with a draft. The draft was shared through the NMEP network for edits. And since it was published in the middle of September, we've gotten a great amount of uptake through associations, networking groups like FEO. I know Janet's on the call today. Thanks very much, Janet Sellery, for sharing the guide through the Event Safety Alliance, Canada chapter. 2 thumbs up, thanks so much. And we've been working offline to share the document with our colleagues in the ministry, with the province, and through other networking associations. So we're organically getting the word out and receiving great feedback.
Wonderful. I've seen it on LinkedIn. I've seen that you've shared it on LinkedIn, on Facebook. So that's really wonderful. And we're glad to help get the message out for you. As in any document or any suggestions, there's going to be larger communities and smaller communities. This document, it allows you to pick what it is that you need that can work for you, I'm assuming, right? That you don't have to follow it exactly, you just work with what you have.
Sure, so I can speak to the structure of the guide itself, and I'm just noticing in the chat there's a question about the link to where they can find the guide. So Deb, can you remind us, it's available, the download of the PDF on the FEO website, correct?
Correct, it is, yeah.
Perfect. So for those of you who have seen the document, please don't be intimidated by the length of it. What we set out to do was develop a resource that is very comprehensive, but also very user-friendly. So the table of contents really guides the reader through the sections that are relevant to you, whether you're a municipal colleague working in a city or a town in the special event office, the recreation office, or anywhere else special events happen in your municipality, or perhaps you're a private sector colleague or a stakeholder with an agency or a supplier company. There's content in the guide for you as well. The table of contents, like I mentioned, really guides the reader. So there are 2 core sections to the document, sections 3 and sections 4. Section 3 appeals to municipal colleagues specifically, or anyone who works in a parent organization that is structured somewhat similar to a municipality. That could be for-profit, not-for-profit. If you report to a leadership structure who oversees direction or strategy associated with events, you're going to find some really good content in section 3. Section 4, our hope is that it appeals to everyone, no matter where you work in the special event industry. You'll notice in section 4, it is an alphabetized list of what we call event indicators, or different logistical elements that are likely involved in some, if not all, events, specifically outdoor events, that any one of you might be involved in. So you can orient yourself alphabetically through those topics, pick the topics that apply to either the nature of the work that you do or the types of events that you plan, and you can kind of get connected with the other industry best practices, considerations, and guidelines that we've assembled under those alphabetized headings. So in no particular order, if you're interested in COVID guidelines for sanitation, under the S, you can get connected with sanitation. Food vendors or food trucks, under the F, you can flip to anything that we've found that we think is relevant for food, and follow through as the guidelines and as your events slowly start to recover. You can review that content and apply it to the pre-planning that hopefully everyone is doing now to get ready for the day when gatherings and groups can come back together.
Rebecca, I think you made a good point earlier about just addressing the fact that this guide is specific to outdoor events and festivals versus indoor. We found that in our municipal environment, those that manage facilities have established and have implemented their own guiding documents and considerations-based documents. So just want to highlight that for those on the call.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dan. And Jay did put the link in the chat for us. So if anybody wants to access it, just copy that link. You know, make sure you follow the chat a little bit because there may be some back and forth with that. Did you want me to put up the screen, Rebecca, and start your presentation, or?
Sure, we can. I think we've spoken to some of the content there, but perhaps for those on today's call who are not familiar with the document, we can just kind of breeze through some of the content that Dan and I put together. Maybe we'll just skip the first preamble in the slide. We can go to anything Dan wants to address on slide 2 that he hasn't mentioned already, and then I'll pick up on slide 3.
Okay.
So Deb, if you could just go back a slide.
Yep.
I think that just back one. I think I've highlighted, and I'm working on off a dual screen, so my apologies if I'm not staring directly into my camera.
It's okay.
But this slide just speaks to our NMEP group that I've highlighted already. It talks a little bit about some of the other work that we do in the industry in terms of developing resources and networking and advocacy on behalf of municipal events staff. In terms of the guide itself, we started to think through this guide in really more closely in July, and you know, I mentioned earlier, we found that there was a need for municipal event staff to have this type of governing document or resource available to them. What I found early on through COVID was that there are a number of event organizers, both private and in the municipal sector, that were trying to pivot and figure out new ways to deliver events according to the guidelines. And so the practice of establishing a game plan, trying to you know, launch an event in our communities that followed suit with the guidelines at the time through stage 2 of the recovery, of the provincial recovery, there were components in there that made it difficult for event staff within municipalities who approve permits to look at or have, I guess, a tool to identify how we could go about issuing permits. A number of our municipalities canceled events and festivals outright through, you know, March and the first portion of the pandemic. And many of us have followed to cancel events and festivals through the remainder of the year in 2020. And so this guide gave us an opportunity to look at things from sort of a broad-based lens to create something that people could use as they recover into 2021. And it's our intention as we move forward to, you know, produce and publish, you know, a version 2 of this guide as the pandemic progresses. We actually, we spent July through September doing the research that Rebecca alluded to, and it culminated into a guide that was published on September the 14th. So I don't have much more to add to this slide, Rebecca, if you want to jump into slide 3.
Sure. So here I've summarized, again, just for those who are a little less familiar with the document, kind of the high-level goals and some of the content that we've already spoken to. As Dan mentioned, this is a reference document for the development of best practices. I think an important point of clarification here is myself, Dan, and the 6 other colleagues who are on the NMEP executive, as well as all of the contributors and collaborators who spent time reviewing or submitting content for review to the guide. We're not the end all be all, right? We're not the decision makers. We're certainly, you know, in most cases, several layers removed from any legislation that gets created or guiding requirements or protocols, even for our own municipalities. But there is some common threads, as Dan had indicated, that kind of weave through what we do as far as municipal best practices go. So we wanted to really bring forward that common content and offer a bit of a benchmark to those who may be less familiar than ourselves with developing municipal approaches to special events, so that we're all using the same language, and so that as the pandemic evolves and as we start to really dig into next year and what our leadership is expecting from us in terms of what events can recover and when, there is some common approaches throughout all of Ontario. The content of the guide itself, we've mentioned a few times, it does receive guidance from those who are subject matter experts. The ESA event guide was a great document that we reviewed very closely. In the document itself, the NMEP guide, we do provide hyperlinks to other resources, federal, provincial, municipal, regional resources that have been produced that are at a high level. What we've really done as municipal event experts is provided some guiding principles and some considerations for interpretation of those high-level guidelines. So it is worth noting that even pre-COVID, preparedness, emergency, risk management principles were concepts and content that was becoming very prevalent and expected, not only from within our own organizations, but also from the guests and the attendees that we serve at our events. And so we expect, as I'm sure you're already seeing, a lot of those guiding principles to really inform how we get through COVID as an industry and as a collection of colleagues, and then how we plan safe and public health savvy events to return in the longer term. So a good deal of the content is built around the principles of preparedness planning, emergency management, and risk management, so that we can continue to advocate and develop our own professionalism for the safe and successful return of events. On the next slide, as I indicated previously, there are 4 core sections to the document itself. I'll review those just at a high level. Again, it's built for the ease of the reader. So the hope is that after you've navigated section 1, which really outlines a bit more about the guide's goals and objectives, some common terminology, and also the research methods that we've used to develop the guide, section 2 really digs into perspectives on how your organization may be able to determine that it's safe and reasonable to return to events. I know what we're seeing in the municipal sector is that some communities are returning to modified, perhaps drive-in or reverse format events, where others are taking a step back and have put on pause any in-person gatherings, whether they're direct delivered from the municipality or they're permitted out to third parties. So section 2 provides a great context for the responsibilities that we all share to adhering to government legislation and ensuring events as safe workspaces. Section 3 and 4, like I said before, this is really the meat of the structure of the document. Section 3 is the guidelines that we're providing to municipal event professionals or anyone interested in how an event office inside a municipality works with respect to the development of systems and structures that support existing community events and then eventually the return to events. Some of you might be familiar with acronyms like SEAT or SET, the Special Event Advisory Team, or the Special Event Team, which is usually a group of subject matter experts inside a municipality who support community events They oversee applications. At times they will approve the request for the use of municipal property. In section 3, we've given considerations for, if you don't already have one of those groups in your municipality, how to engage one of those groups, as well how to engage what we're calling a return to event work group. So a group of like-minded individuals within your municipality or perhaps across your agency or your jurisdiction who can come together and set some guiding principles around the types of events that are able to return and how a municipality might support those events from a staffing point of view, from a resourcing point of view, perhaps even from a financial point of view. Some good considerations there in section 3. And then section 4 is really the practical nitty-gritty consideration that will hopefully benefit all readers. It's a comprehensive list, like I said, of topic areas A to Z. And Dan alluded to it before. We very much hope that this document is iterative so that there will be a version 2, a version 3 perhaps, and moving into next year, future versions where we can build out that A to Z list. So if you're looking at the document now or you're looking at it after this call at any point and you see a topic area that isn't yet covered or you feel should be addressed in some way to align with existing guidance, Deb has our contact information, and certainly you can reach out to us. We would love your feedback. Also, incidentally, if you find a typo in the document, we can correct that in the next version as well. So please know that this is not something that we want to just stick on a shelf. Now we've done it, check the box. Dan, myself, and all the colleagues in our network are very committed to ensuring that this is a resource that evolves and moves forward as our industry does. Lastly, I'll just address the resources because we, again, are by no means the end-all be-all on the content of this guide. Throughout the document itself, we've provided hyperlinks to resources that we found particularly beneficial or particularly valuable. There is a chart on page 6 that I'll draw your attention to, and those are the hyperlinks to all of the federal, provincial, and agency groups that basically have jurisdiction over approving different elements involved in events. You'll find on page 6. And then starting on page 36 and then concluding at the end of the document is a very lengthy list of all of the industry resources that we took a look at in one way, shape, or form to inform the resources and the considerations in the NMEP guide. So if you find something of interest throughout the document, you'll notice in parentheses there are little numbers. The numbers are citations. They correspond to the numerical order of the references starting on page 36, and you can definitely follow the path there to get a more fulsome review of some of the content coming from other sources.
So Rebecca, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say with that, you know, we've provided a bit of a review of the document, and Debbie, we're happy to answer more questions.
Yeah, you alluded to making additions, updates, and changes. Where do you plan to go in the future with this?
I don't mind addressing that question, Rebecca. So Debbie, it's a great question. One of the things we've been discussing amongst our executive team is to look at possibly developing templated tools that our members can use or event organizers in a municipal setting can use when they're developing and establishing their own internal guidelines and recovery efforts. So an example of that would be just something as simple as a COVID-19 checklist, possibly some screening related tools, possibly a hazard assessment tool for, you know, those of us that are reviewing both our city or town-led event portfolios and approving community third-party applications through our seat teams, et cetera. So that might be where we go in version 2. I think future versions will be contingent on how this pandemic continues to unfold. By no means is what the information in this document is, as Rebecca mentioned, is cited from other sources that have already published great content. And so we're not necessarily putting out there anything new. It's more so a culmination of what we feel is best to consider when, your respective team is moving forward with their planning.
Okay. And so for moving forward for 2021, how do you recommend people use this for 2021?
Another great question. Rebecca, I'll start if you want to add, if I've missed anything that you want to include. In Richmond Hill, we've taken this document and started to look more closely at our internal city-led event and festival portfolio. And by using this document, I've been able to establish best practices and what we need to think about as we move forward into 2021, but also how we need to strategically restructure what we're delivering for our communities so that the public feels safe to attend whatever it is we put out there in the future. As it pertains to our third-party process, we've had to accommodate and adjust to incorporate things like a COVID-19 safety plan from organizers that are coming to our office requesting city property to run, their what was once a 15,000 person event in Richmond Hill. And we want to make sure that those that are planning to do so in the future have a good understanding of what's required in terms of guidelines and considerations, and have done so through a dedicated COVID-19 safety plan that they submit with their festival and event application. So I think a number of municipalities will start to think that way as well and start to accommodate their normal business practice to incorporate COVID-related, documentation and new ways of running events and festivals. Rebecca, did you want to add anything there?
Sure. So I can give a bit of a...
Can't hear you, Rebecca. Nope. Try again. There.
How's that?
I don't know, your microphone doesn't seem to be working. Is it close to your face, your microphone?
Taking my microphone off. Is that any better?
Mm. No, you seem muted. That's funny. Try again. The volume is really down.
Yeah, it's a bit low. Debbie, why don't we look at the chat while we're waiting on Rebecca?
Okay.
So Jay, I think that's Jay, has shared our link to this guide,
Yep.
which is available on the FEO website. So thank you, Jay, for doing that. Linda's noted that there's templates would be awesome. Is there a template of a safety plan in the guide? So great question, Linda. We've not developed that safety plan template as of yet. I'm working on one for Richmond Hill specifically that fits within our SEAT process. I'm happy to share that with you once it's been vetted through the appropriate channels. If you so wish to have a copy of that, I can include my email in the chat so we can connect offline.
Janet Celery has some comments and questions that she'd like to share with us. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I'd been in touch with Rebecca over the period of time when the guide was being developed, and so I was really excited when it finally got published, and I just wanted to make a few comments about what I'm seeing in this. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm a chair for the Event Safety Alliance Canada, and I have been reading a lot of guidance. I've probably got about 150 different documents in my little Excel spreadsheet. And this is one that really jumps to the top of the list. What I like about it is that it's really well organized and the links are all credible sources. And there's some really neat features with the recovery timeline, the returned events working group, who should be part of that. a really nice section about modifying and rescoping events. And of course, one of my favorite topics, risk assessment, is snuggled in there as well, with also a good little link section about volunteer management and the importance of documentation. So I was really pleased to see all of that. But overall, one of the things I think is most important about what this specific document does is it sets all of this information that we're all reading, we're all seeing, really clearly within the context of outdoor municipal events. Part of what I know I'm struggling with, and some of you on the call may be doing as well, is that there is a fire hose of information, and it can be tricky to figure out like which is the stuff I should be using. The other thing that I think is valuable is I think this document does a really great job in demonstrating the expertise of event professionals. So everybody on this call knows how valuable that is, but we're at a time now when the other people who need to understand that is public health. And it's very difficult, I think, for public health to understand when people are asking for exemptions, when they're asking for increased gathering sizes and capacities. I don't know that everyone on that side of the conversation has a clear picture about the level of expertise and professionalism that event planners can bring to that conversation. So I think it's great as a sort of translation document in that way. And I just want to mention a couple more upcoming pieces of guidance that you'll be seeing, hopefully in the next month or so. One is the Ministry of Labor Live Performance Health and Safety Advisory Committee is working on guidance, and that will hopefully be out within the month. It's hard to say how long it'll take to win through the ministry. And there's another project called #LightsOn, which is creating a venue manager's guide. So that would be more towards the indoor side of the equation, and that's being developed through the Ryerson School of Creative Industries. So there, I just wanted to share a few of my ideas. I'm super enthused to see the great amount of work that this executive committee has come up with, and it's going to be really valuable for the whole industry. So thanks you guys for that.
Thanks, Janet. And when those documents come out, maybe you can share them with us and we can share them with our industry.
Yeah, you'll see them in my newsletter.
Okay, perfect.
And then you can shift it, you can
okay.
disseminate far and wide, however you like.
Excellent, wonderful, thanks. Thanks, Janet. Dave wants to say something.
Hi, everybody. Dan and Rebecca, I'm just wondering how you guys have dealt with this. I've been on the ministry roundtable from the beginning with all of these different plans, and I know from a sector association point of view is our frustration has been right from the beginning. The ministry and health, Ministry of Health as well, have been more of a submit us ideas on how you can get back to business. And what we've all as sector association leaders have said from the beginning, and what we still haven't got to date, is please give us guidelines that we are expected to meet so that we can then meet them, rather than us go through checklists. And you know, I don't know how many, and certainly your guys' document is at the top of the heap, but personally, I alone have probably submitted 25 different plans to the government with no response still. And I'm just wondering, have you guys gotten anything more than that from anybody at a ministry level? Or, and I know it's difficult with 440 municipalities. Everybody does something a little bit differently, but at least you capture all the steps in the process. So I don't know if that's more of a question or a statement, but I know that's certainly been my biggest frustration. Is it's a lot easier to say, here's 20 points you need to actively be back engaged. And if you can meet all of those criteria, you're back in business, as opposed to, well, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And
yeah, I think, Dave, that's a great question, great comment. If I had to throw it out there, I'd venture to guess that municipalities, as well as the province, will likely not give a checklist of must-haves in order to rubber stamp an event or festival as a go forward. I don't know that anybody's wanting to take on that responsibility, and that's unfortunate. And to Janet's point earlier, Janet, thank you for those great comments, by the way. One of the things we're starting to see in municipalities is that organizers are looking to deliver events in a reformatted way, excuse me, on private property. And so they're going to, you know, shopping mall parking lots, and they're looking at private property owners who don't have the same type of regulations that us municipal entities do have in delivering events at this time. And that, to me, is a bit of a negative for the industry as a whole, because it's, and we've talked about this before, Dave, if one organizer goes out there and really screws up, it's going to have further impact across the board. So I would just say to that point, you know, continue to submit plans and continue to work locally with public health units to find out what locally those individuals within the public health branches are feeling about the plans that are coming forward. So long as the plans fall within the guide, fall within the regulations. And the regulations for the most part are pretty clear on what's acceptable and what's not right now.
Just a follow-up, Dan and Rebecca, just listening to the minister's call on Friday and seeing different documents that are emerging today with everything moving backwards. And I suppose the first thing I thought of was when they moved the summer games to 2022. And in the minister's call, she referenced, you know, this isn't a 2021 issue. This is more of a 4 or 5 year recovery now. Have you guys heard any more on, and I know this whole rollback thing is just starting to gain momentum as the numbers tend to rise and the winter's upon us. Have you heard anything through a network group of changes or delays further than what we all are hearing now?
Can't hear you, Rebecca.
So I can just jump in. I have not heard of that. I know that every municipality is taking a very different approach in terms of recovery and when they feel it appropriate to deliver events or issue permits for events. Every move is slow and calculated. So you know, the calls I've been on with the minister and what I've been listening to in the industry, you know, I don't know that they're necessarily not wanting this industry to rebound. I think it's just a matter of seeing what the COVID cases look like in the next little while, and really trying to reformat whatever you're delivering so that you're not encouraging the usual gatherings that we typically have at these events. And maybe that's a blending of offering some virtual with some drive-in or drive-through scenarios, scaling back to not necessarily focusing on the broader market and maybe focusing more locally. But that's, you know, at least in what I've been hearing, where I can see municipalities going in the next, throughout 2021 for sure, and possibly beyond that.
Rebecca, you want to give it another go? No? Okay. Are there any other questions? Any other comments? Any other? You can just unmute yourself and ask your question. Linda, go ahead.
I don't know whether it's so much a question. I appreciate being on this and be involved with this. Just to give you a background, I organized a festival. This was supposed to be our 20th anniversary this year. Basically picture, 7,000 people, 1,000 wiener dogs in a park, and you've got Wiener Fest. We rescue wiener dogs just to promote, educational about, dog rescue and appropriate responsible dog ownership and those kind of things. And we were hit hard. We lost $10,000 this year because we didn't have the event, and the rescue didn't have the funds this year. And I'm just frustrated because I'm trying to just get an answer if we can have the festival next year. We can't do a virtual. We have people come from all over. which we understand for next year, we can't have people probably come to the States. But, you know, we have the wiener races. We've got people that come all over for the bobbing for wieners. We have 100 vendors that come. So there's no way for us to do it virtually. We tried, it was a bust. Because people like to come and bring their dogs. So it's like, you know, I've messaged Lisa McLeod and I got a message from her. Actually, I was very impressed. Doug Ford did call me back. And basically his answer was, you need to talk to your Board of Health. And he goes, they're the ones that make the decision. I'm like, he goes, I can't tell you anything. You got to talk to Board of Health. So I talked to Board of Health here. We're with London, Woodstock, Southwest. And they said, well, we can't really tell you anything. We can just kind of give you guidelines. So then Lisa McLeod was on TV and saying, oh, the games are coming to London for July 2021. I'm like, okay, so can we have our festival? Well, we can't really tell you that. And it's like, just getting so frustrated because I thought, okay, maybe if the gatherings go up to 1,000, we could do crowd control because, you know, but we could, you know, have them in at the gate. I have, you know, suggestions. Okay, you know what, we have them, you know, they can't come unless they have the app on their phone. We can do, you know, they have to show us, you know, we've got, they sign a waiver, those kind of things. But I'm getting no answer. Like you said, I've got all these plans, but the Board of Health says, well, you know, we really don't approve those plans. So they sound good. And I'm like, I'm just spinning my wheels. Just what are we doing? It's like, I don't know if we could take another, we can't have the festival. So the municipality said, book. He said, I wouldn't book anything before July because usually we're the last weekend in June. He said, and we're going for August 14th. Hopefully that we can have a gathering of 1,000 people, do crowd control. They've got to sign a waiver when they came in. They got to show us that they have the COVID app. We have to have them, you know, bring in contract tracing. So everyone has to give us a sheet of paper with their name, phone number, where we can get a hold of them. You know, we have to have hand washing stations put into place, extra, you know, everyone wears PPE. And then it's all the
Linda, do
volunteers.
you
And
have
it's
a
like,
question? Do you have a question for us?
where do we go to figure all this out if we can do it?
I'm going to leave that up to you guys because I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I don't know that there is an answer. I think it's along the same lines as what Dave was mentioning earlier. You know, this is an opportunity for organizers to look at their event and accommodate based on the pandemic. So that may mean, you know, running an event in multiple locations where you can keep the gathering size down. It may mean, you know, changing your programming so that you are now in a drive-through or drive-in type of scenario.
I'm on a call, I'll call you back.
And that's really gonna depend on, I think, the organizing group, the amount of resource you have to change, implement change. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we're all sort of in the same scenario in some regard. And this is what I think the beauty of these calls and other networking type calls is about. It's connecting with our peers to find out how they're, you know, shifting and what they're doing in terms of new planning, and trying to incorporate that into your own festival or event.
And Dan, just jumping in on that, one of the things we're doing through the roundtables and the sector associations is we're really trying to make the government aware. And I think they are, although with some of their announcements, you wonder how much they hear or not, is that events don't pivot on 1 or 2 day notice. Like when you say you're going to change something on Saturday and it's Thursday, well, you've already planned for 6 weeks to make that happen. And just trying to get that thought process around is that these things don't happen overnight. And if you're going to transition to digital, or you're going to try a combo approach, that, you know, some long-term decisions and planning have to be taken account for, because, you know, setting and I think that's why they're reluctant, but if you set a scale of what you have to do now, and that changes in 3 months, and you've spent another $5,000 rejigging your event to meet those standards, which then change again in 3 weeks. You know, it's a vicious cycle, and we've already started to see some of that happening. So
it absolutely is a vicious cycle. It's unfortunate. It requires some decision making, and you know, you need to be able to, I guess, I mean, it's different in our municipal sector in that, you know, our budgets are the operating budgets that are approved through our councils, and whether or not we use that money or we don't, you know, we're not as hard pressed by the bottom line, and that's going to require some decision making, unfortunately, as we go through this. I don't know that any government entity is going to, you know, give an official okay on any plan at this point. From what I've seen, they're leaving it solely up to the organizer to develop the appropriate plan and to be responsible for any possible infection that arises from whatever event is produced at this point.
Any other comments, questions? Rebecca, did you get back on okay?
I'm here. How's that?
Yay! Yeah, good. Good.
The magic of technology. I apologize, folks. I'm on my phone, so I hope it's okay. Thanks for continuing the conversation. I've been able to listen all the way along. I will just jump in on the last point to say the point that Dave made about the lead time that events require, should be planning for in order to recover or in order to plan under normal circumstances is something that we're struggling with in Markham and many of the municipal colleagues that I've spoken to as well. And that's really what's going to be a challenge that takes us into next season. Anecdotally, I've heard that there are municipalities who have already kind of internally made the decision that they will not be returning to a spring season next year because they just don't have the guidance necessary. And to the point made earlier, perhaps there just isn't guidance to be able to provide at this point, that we are going day to day or week to week on gathering limits. It's going to get us through the winter, but no one rightfully knows what next year is going to look like. So it's probably unrealistic and unpractical to forecast that, to put event organizers into the position where they have to make commitments, spend money, engage in contracts, only then to have to walk back perhaps next year if conditions are not ideal. So as far as the preparation that I think that an MEP guide can offer to event organizers to get themselves as close to ready as possible for the time when it comes that it is safe and reasonable to return, the advice I can offer is if you know, whether you're a municipal event organizer or an independent or private planner, if you haven't already engaged a recovery work group, start that work now. If you haven't sat down and set aside time to have the conversations, to do the strategic discussion and decision making that it's going to take for your organization to be able to green light or press go on when an event can actually happen. Best case, we get public health clearance in March or April that events can take place next summer, which might be able to salvage, you know, mid to large size community festivals in the late summer or early fall. Allow yourself to be best positioned in that circumstance to have already done all of the deep digging. So really you just focus on logistics operations at that point.
Thanks, Rebecca. I hope that Linda helped a little bit for you. And Peter did say an issue raised by Wet Weiderfest rep is important to consider. Oops. The public health reps don't tell us what their guidelines and criteria are for approving an event, yet they will say yay or nay, but based on what? So I understand it's really challenging. And Janet also said it's so frustrating, but no one knows how the course of the pandemic will go. Here's my view at this point. There's no answer for events in 2021. Planners will need to delay planning until much closer to their events and be prepared to change or cancel if it's not safe. Priority needs to be given to school health care and long-term care. P.S. Check insurance. Yeah. Did somebody have a question or a comment there? Dave.
Yeah, just further to what Janet said and just touching on the Ministry of Health again, and that seems to be a vicious circle in that the Ministry of Health for the province overrides everything. And then your local health unit can alter what they've said too, so it becomes a vicious circle. But I think the important thing for everybody to remember, and what Dan and Rebecca and their team has done here, is they've given you the tools to create a plan. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to have that plan in place and then pivot as changes come down the pipe, so that you're not constantly reinventing the wheel. You've got your basis for the plan as you know it today, and you're ready to pivot tomorrow as changes come, so that you're not starting from square one. And you know, I think once you get that plan in place, then it's like you having a risk management plan, where it's a living, breathing document that you check in on, whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever. But it's not, once you're finished, it's not a finished document. It lives forever and change as the changes come.
And Linda said that was my question. What about insurance? I don't know if anybody here can answer that, other than I don't know where insurance is going right now with this, and to check with your agents. But does anybody have a comment on that? Okay, check with your insurance agent. Somebody also said, can someone share their COVID waiver with the group? I do want to just put a plug in for next week. We have Peter Ashwin coming, speaking from ERMS, and he's going to be talking about the COVID-19 event risk horizon. Is COVID-19 the risk, or merely the risk trigger for other risk events? So that may be a question that you could ask Peter, but does anybody here have an idea about the waiver?
Deb, I can just jump in on that point, and further to what Dan had mentioned earlier about the next version of the NMEP guide.
Yep.
We hope to be able to bundle. We hope to be able to bundle some of those templated resources together with that next version that we are targeting to release before the holidays, so before Christmas, let's say late November. You know, certainly if there are resources that others can share now, time is of the essence, and if others can share those resources with us, we'd be happy to review them and look for opportunities to share them once the next version of the the next version of the guide goes out. So I will just kind of plant that seed. If there are templates that others think would be helpful, want to see, have seen, and can share, please connect with Dan and I, and we'll look to get those in the next guide.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Deb, if I could just jump in.
Yeah?
I just wanted to clarify Marie's question about COVID waiver. Marie, are you looking for waiver language for permits that you issue, or would this be a waiver that you would issue to anybody that participates in your event? I don't know if you want to jump off the mic, or waiver language for organizers. Okay, we've had the experience in Richmond Hill that we've had some different scenarios in terms of waiver language, all having been vetted through our legal division. So there's some language that goes into permits, and there's some other language that has gone into some of our, I guess, quote unquote, working documents that we issue to those that participate. So I'll dig through that and see if I can share that post this meeting.
Linda said, I was told by BOH that vendors and people working at the event do not count towards group gathering size. Just a comment, I guess, to that.
That's what we've heard as well. I think that's in the guidelines. Yeah,
and that's my understanding through all of our roundtable and sector group stuff, is that employees do not count towards the 50 inside or 100 outside.
Wonderful, thank you. Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
Deb, I wanted to address it early. If I can just jump in now, it takes us back a little bit to, you know, what are the benefits of the guide, and how can we as an NMEP group help those on the call and anyone else who's going to listen to this recording moving forward. I just wanted to kind of go on record to say that the guide itself is up for grabs. So if there's language that the guide offers you in your own recovery efforts or in your own COVID guide development, approach that you want to take from that document and use as a base for your own document, you're certainly welcome to do that. I'll put myself out there to say that, you know, that's the approach that Markham is taking. And I know we had a conversation amongst the NMEP team, and when we presented the guide to the NMEP network last month, we offered this resource as the baseline. So certainly not everything in the document is going to be able to apply word for word, I wouldn't expect, with what your individual municipality is looking to do. But definitely in section 4, that A to Z topic area, kind of going back to the conversation about how do we lobby the province for a checklist, or how do we lobby to receive guidelines. I think we have the guidelines, and now it's on us to be able to work individually as a collective to just reiterate that we're all doing the same thing. And if that means that you're borrowing language right out of the NMEP guide and you're putting it in your own municipal event recovery document, please do that. Please cite the other resources that we have cited, because the language is not ours in the first place, but we definitely have provided and built this document to be adapted. I think there's a sentence in section 1 that says something to this effect: use and adapt this document so that you're not reinventing the wheel, and you don't have to spend the time that we've spent to wordsmith exactly the approach that hopefully we're all going to take together.
Thanks, Rebecca. All right, well, we're coming up to time. So I want to thank you, Rebecca and Dan, for being here and sharing your document, your knowledge and your expertise. It's invaluable to us in this industry. Thanks to everyone who attended this meeting, and I will be sending out an update to you all. And thank you for being here. And looking forward to seeing you next week. Peter Ashman is next week, and then we have the week after Workplace Safety and Prevention, who is going to be coming on board and talking about some things as well. It's all on our website. Go to our website and register. And if you have any ideas about who you'd like to hear speak here, let us know. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.